What's up everyone? Thank you for joining me for another episode here at Blended Graphics. Today's episode is all about glows. And more specifically, I'm going to show you how we can basically give realistic glows to any single object. It does not matter. Today's episode, we're going to use the Earth as our prime example. But all of these steps that you can use, again, you can apply these to any object that you want. And I actually went ahead and gave you links to both the hand as well as the Earth stock images that I'm using for this tutorial. Now, if you want to download those and use them and follow along, I highly encourage you to do so. The background image was just something I had in my own personal library, so I don't have a link to that. But if you want to use any background image for this, it does not matter because that's not our main focus. So with that said, let's not waste any more time and let's jump right into the tutorial. Alright, here we are with our blank 5x4 canvas size. Let's take a quick peek at the images that we're going to use today. We've got our background, our hand, and then lastly we have Earth. We're going to start with this background. Go ahead and press Ctrl or Command T. That way we can transform this and scale it up so it fits the entire canvas. We can now load in our hand and we can actually scale this up a bit as well. And once this is in place, so somewhere right around here looks good, we want to extract the hand from its background. Now you can use any selection tool to do this. I'm actually going to use the pen tool because I think that's the most precise tool. And as I'm using this tool, you can see on that left side of the hand, a lot of it is really blurred. So that's something that we're going to have to pay attention to. Our hand's not our main focus, but to keep things very cohesive, we want to make sure that we're paying attention to that as well and keeping those blurs intact. Because what's actually going to happen here is once we extract the hand from the background using this pen tool, all of our edges are going to be very clean. So we need to bring back some of those blurs. And we're actually just finishing up with this selection right now. So we're going to come down here and we're going to link this up, right click, make selection, and then hit OK. And then let's hit the layer mask so we have the hand by itself. We now want to add a levels adjustment layer and then either Alt or Option, click in between those two layers so that way we can clip it. And we're going to bring in some contrast. So bring in the shadow anchor points and then a little bit of the midtones will push to the left as well as the highlights. All right, so this looks pretty good. We want to go ahead and convert this to a smart object. So we're going to right click on this layer and then go down to convert to smart object. At the top, we want to go to filter, down to blur, add Gaussian blur, and then right around 5 pixels should do it. We're going to go ahead and bring back the blur that we just took out using that pen tool. We're going to invert the mask by pressing Command I, and then using a white brush and a soft round brush, we're just going to paint back along the edge here. So that way we can bring back some of this blur. Now you'll see right here by the thumb, it doesn't look really clean, and I'm not going to focus too much on that for the sake of the tutorial because that's not what our focus is. If I had a bit more time to do this as a personal project, I'd spend some more time on that. So I'm just going to take another second here to work on this. Now I'll probably come back later on in this video to clean it up a bit more. But for now, this will be just fine. We're going to turn on our Earth layer and then Alt or Option click on this eyeball to isolate it by itself. Go to the quick selection tool, select subject, and then hit the layer mask icon so that way we can isolate it by itself. Alt or Option click on the eye once more and go ahead and press Ctrl or Command T. And we're just going to bring this up just a little bit further up in the picture. Someone right here looks good. In fact, let's go ahead and hit Ctrl or Command T once more and just rotate it slightly. Somewhere right here. All right, so one final thing I want to add to this background before we start working on the glows is I want to add a blur to this background. So we're going to go up to the very top to filter, and then we go down to blur, back to Gaussian blur. And actually this looks fine where it is, so we can leave it at the 5 pixels. Let's go ahead and click OK. All right, so everything is set up now. Perfect. So when it comes to glows, the number one rule to start out with is you have to have a lot of contrast between the object that's glowing and the background or any other surrounding objects. So with that said, let's go ahead and add an exposure adjustment layer to this background. And let's go ahead and clip it to the background. And taking that slider, let's bring it all the way to the left there. And you know what I'm going to do actually? I'm going to go ahead and just add a levels adjustment layer on top of this so that way I can try to decrease the highlights a bit on that. So let's try this avenue here. Let's add that on top, clip it below, taking that highlight anchor point, and let's just drag that to the left. So somewhere right around here is fine. We're going to continue to work on this and darken up the background. And because I know we're going to be using a lot of blue glows, I want to go ahead and try to make our background a bit more blue in tint. So let's go ahead and add a color balance adjustment layer. And we're just going to shift those sliders a little bit more to the blues and the cyans in these highlights, midtones, and shadows here. So this looks pretty good here. And then we can add just a blank layer on top of this because I still want to darken it up a bit more. And I'm just going to sample one of these dark points here. And let's go ahead and switch to a soft round brush. And we're just going to paint over the top here. So I don't want to entirely lose the detail of the background. I just want it to be very subtle. It doesn't have to be obvious. So even the bottom here, we can just darken up that a little bit. And we're at a good spot here as far as foundation goes to build this glowing effect. Before we start to add quite a few more layers on top of this, I want to go ahead and just organize myself a little bit here. So let's highlight all these, group them together by pressing Command G, and let's just give this our background title. And then we can even do the same thing with our other layers too, because I'm going to start adding more and more layers on top of those. So we'll just call this our hand, and then earth, and then the same thing. We'll just group these together so that way we can just keep ourselves organized. Okay, and now before we actually start the glowing process, I want to make our earth just a little bit brighter and make some of those bright points pop just a little bit more. So we're going to do that before we start playing around with some color. So let's go back down here and add a levels adjustment layer on top of this. And so for our shadows, we can just keep the shadows there actually. For the highlights and the midtones, we're just going to push those over to the left just a little bit. I don't want it to be very drastic, just very subtle. And then we can see the before and after on this. So that's that nice little pop of color and the highlights that I'm looking for. All right, so step one is complete. We got the contrast and the lighting levels basically where we want them to be. We can now start to play with some color and blend modes to start this glowing effect along the edge here. We're going to add a solid color adjustment layer, and I've already found this blue color ahead of time, so it's not just by accident. And then what we're going to do with this solid color adjustment layer is we're going to put this into a linear burn blend mode. And what I want to essentially accomplish with this is I just want to give the earth a bit more blue shade and a tint to it instead of being so white. So let's lower the opacity a bit more. And then we can even see the before and after, just how it gives it just a bit more blue in color. That's what I want. And then we're going to paint black just on the bottom here on that layer mask, so that way we can keep that a bit more white. And then we're going to add another solid color adjustment layer on top of this. We're going to keep it the same color. But for this one, we're actually going to put it into an overlay blend mode instead. And we want to start creating that atmosphere that Earth has and create that glowing effect. Now, if you're not using Earth as an object and using something else, you still want to do something very similar to this. I've inverted that mask by pressing Command I, and then we're just going to paint white just along the edge here. I'm at 20% opacity, and just on this left edge here. I'm not going to focus too much on the right side. I want to keep that a little bit darker. So that's a nice little touch to it that we've added on. We're just going to gradually build up this glowing effect. All right, so this is looking pretty good here. What we're going to do is now add a new layer underneath our earth. So click that bottom layer, and then if you hold Control or Command, and then click on the new layer icon, that's going to give you a new layer beneath our layer. And that's really handy, especially when you're working in groups. And just to kind of show you here, I'm just using white as my main color because right now, if you look around the edge here, our select subject, it looked like it gave us a really nice clean selection, but you can see it's a little bit rough. So we want to clean that up a little bit here. And how we're going to do that is we want to click on the Earth's layer mask. And once we clicked on that layer mask, we want to go all the way up to the top to filter. And then we want to scroll all the way down to where it says other. And then we want to click on minimum. We'll leave this at the 2 pixels and hit OK. What this does now, it is just basically, shrinks this down by 2 pixels just along the edge there. So that way we can clean it up a little bit. All right, let's go ahead and get rid of that layer now that we've done this. And we're gonna focus our attention to the hand. So let's close up this group here first and get into our hand layer. And I want to add a hue and saturation adjustment layer to the hand. And we're gonna start focus on the color grading for this a little bit here. So let's hit that colorize box. Let's click that on there. And we wanna match that blue tone that we've got going on with Earth. So somewhere right around here should be just okay for us. And we can lower the saturation just a little bit. All right, let's close this up here. And we can just go ahead and paint black on that layer mask. And let's turn down the flow a little bit here first. All right, so I'm gonna paint black just so we can bring back some of that color that we originally had on here. I don't want it to be completely blue and desaturated, so I do want to bring back some of that red that we had on there originally. All right, and then I also noticed that we need to clean this up a little bit too. Didn't do a great job with that pen selection. All right, so that looks much better. Let's go ahead and go back to our earth layer. We're gonna add 3 layers underneath our earth. And these are gonna be different levels of intensity for glows. So for this first one here, we'll just sample a blue on the water, and we can just change this up just a little bit here. And let's lower this a bit, hit OK. And then using our right bracket key, let's go ahead and increase this brush size. And this is gonna be the largest area. Just at 10% here, we'll just give it a couple of dabs. All right, so that looks pretty good. So we'll just call this glow number 1. And we're gonna do this a couple more times, continuing to shrink the brush size. And the closer that we get to Earth, the higher the opacity that we're gonna use. So this one will change up the color just a little bit as well. And I encourage you to do the same when you're doing your glows. Try to change up the colors. That's gonna help out a lot. And let's hit that left bracket key to shrink this down a little bit. Maybe let's try it right here. Actually, let's go ahead and shrink this down a bit. And if you hit the number 4, we'll make this 40% opacity. Give it a couple of dabs, and that should be just fine. And for this last one, we'll just call this glow number 3. And we're going to add one more because I want to add one that's kind of like the rim light. But we'll go back to glow number 3 here. Let's change up the color. And for this next color, once we find this one we're actually going to go ahead and put it into a color dodge blend mode. And for this, we can increase the opacity a bit more and give it another dab here. In that right side, because I don't want there to be so much glows, we're just going to erase the right side just a little bit so the light is not so bright. Okay, that's looking a lot better. All right, before I get to this last and final glow here, I have to admit, when I was editing this video, I lost some of the footage for this little spot here. I don't know what happened to it. But anyways, it's the same thing. We just lowered the brush size a little bit, and then just on the left side only, I increased the opacity. It just gave the rim just a little bit of glow, and you can see that once I've added this on here. So like I said, didn't do much at all to the right side, just focused on the left a little bit, making those bright points even brighter. All right, let's keep chugging along here. We're adding a new layer on top, and let's go ahead and find a nice blue color to use for this. We've added some of our glows from underneath our earth layer. We're gonna start adding them on top now. This one we're going to put into a color dodge blend mode just to kind of see how this looks. Yep, that'll be just fine here. So just at 10% opacity, let's just start working along the edge here. Again, nothing too crazy. So something just like this. All right, and let's add another one on top. Let's switch up the colors a little bit more. And for this, we're going to put this at 100% opacity. And just along the outside of the edge there, we're just going to start to slowly bring some of this color just on the edge alone and try to make that a little bit more intense. So something like this will be just what we're looking for. So next we want to add a solid color adjustment layer on top of all of this. And we just hit OK, doesn't matter the color for right now. We're going to put this into linear dodge blend mode. And then we're going to go back to the colors here and cycle through some of these blues to see which one we like the best. So somewhere right around here, I like this. Let's invert that by pressing Command I. And then using a soft round brush, we're just going to paint some of this back end by painting white on that layer mask. This is just one extra little bit of touch to add a nice effective glow. So whenever I have something that's kind of like my main subject that is glowing, I will take my time to make it look right and make it look very effective like I'm doing right now. Now, if I have some object in the background that's not my main focus, I'll probably just play around with some of my layer styles by just an inner glow and outer glow, and that usually does the effect. But like I said, when you want something that's your main focus, take your time with it. Don't rush through it, so that way it looks extra cool. So this is going to take us to step number 3, where we want to start adding some highlights to any object that's going to have some sort of interaction with the light. In this case, it's going to be our hand. So step number 1 was creating that contrast and getting the lighting levels right. Number 2 is playing with those different blend modes and colors to create the glows around the object. Number 3 is the highlights. All right, so let's get working on this hand here. Let's get into this group. And I want to go back to our blurred layer mask that we have here. Just clean this up a little bit. I said I was going to get back to this later on in the video, so this is that time. Let's just take our time a little bit, cleaning up some of these edges. It's still a little bit too crisp and clean for my liking. Okay, so before we actually get to the highlights, I'm going to add an exposure adjustment layer underneath our levels layer. And let's turn this all the way down here. I just want to get the lighting a bit more accurate than what we originally had it. So let's invert the mask by pressing Command I and then painting white to bring some of that shadow back in. We're primarily going to focus just kind of on the forearm and the right side of this hand here. Try to make it look just a bit more realistic than what we originally had it. Okay, this looks really good, and I want to change the color a little bit as well. So I'm going to add a color balance adjustment layer. And now let's just go ahead and get those anchors kind of more to the blue a little bit than what we left off at. And you know what, let's take this above our hue and saturation adjustment layer. There we go. Now let's play around with these a little bit more to see what we like. And let's lower the opacity a bit so it's not so prominent. Okay, really nice addition. Let's get to work on these highlights finally. Let's add a solid color adjustment layer and let's hit OK. And we just want to clip this to our hand alone. And we can cycle through some of these blend modes to see what we like. Let's see. Let's stick with overlay here and let's click on that. And we can even change up the color just a little bit just to see what, you know, if we like anything else. Maybe we'll just kind of stick towards something a bit more white. And like everything else, we're going to invert the mask, paint it back in, and we're going to add a couple of layers to our highlights. This is just going to be our foundation to start us off with. All right, really good. Let's add a second layer on top of this. We're not going to add a solid color, just a blank layer here. And once we've added this on top, we're not going to put it into a blend mode either, sticking with the color that we just had. And let's just paint some of this back on top. Now we are starting to lose some of the definition and some of those creases on the fingers. So what we're going to do here in a second is let's double click on this layer, come to blend if, and if you alter option, click on this bottom anchor to divide it in two. We're just going to slide the right one off to the right a little bit to bring back some of those darker colors underneath. In this case, it's just those creases of the fingers. All right, let's take a quick look at the before and after. All right, let's add one more on top of this. And kind of like what we did with the layers underneath our earth layer, how we slowly graduated and made them a bit more intense the closer we got to earth, we're doing the same thing for our highlights. So this one's going to be the brightest spots of the hand and the most intense part of the light being reflected from the earth. And we're just primarily focusing on a lot of the edges of the fingers. So we're just going to take another second or two to get this going here and wrap this up. And then in fact, what I actually want to do is go back to our previous layer and play around with that blend if just a little bit more. I want to bring back some of those darker points. So let's double click back on that, go to blend if, and just slide that a bit more to that right side. All right, so somewhere right around here should do the trick. And now we're adding a solid color adjustment layer on top. We're going to add a bit more blues to this because right now it's really heavily into white, which is fine. For this one, we're going to put it into an overlay blend mode. And we can even go ahead and click back on that, change up the color a little bit. Now, because that white part of Earth is primarily what's focused on the hand, that's why we had a lot of the whites, but the surrounding area is blue. So we want to have some of that blue interaction with our skin. So we're going to invert this mask like we've done with everything else, paint some of this blue tint back on that hand so that way that light is being reflected off of the skin. And honestly, guys, this is pretty much it. There's really not much left to it. We're going to do one little thing here and just kind of add a little bit more of an overall glow on top of the hand just to create a little bit more light interaction. Now, if you're doing this for a personal project, maybe you want to spend a little bit more time working on this, but just for the sake of the tutorial, we're just kind of getting through things here pretty quickly. So we've added the new layer on top. Let's increase the brush size by pressing that right bracket key and using that bluish color. Just give it a couple of dabs just right around the top of the hand here, just kind of on the edge as well. Just so we can have a little bit more of that light rays emitting from our planet. And you know what? I lied. I apologize. I'm going to add one final thing to our background, and that's adding a color balance adjustment layer. I just want to match the tone a little bit more to our planet here. So let's just play around with some of these anchors, make it a little bit more blue and a bit more saturated in that aspect. And let's see the before and after. So that looks great. Now, just to wrap up this whole thing together, what we want to do is merge all of these layers together. And I want to show you an overall before and after to what we started working on for this video today. So let's turn these both on. And here's our before. So at this point, not a lot going on here. It's very dull. And let's go ahead and turn on our after to see all the effects that we've built into this. This looks really cool, guys. We're going to do one more before and after to see what it looks like. So here's our before. And here's our after. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial, everybody. If you followed along, please tag me on Instagram, Blended Graphics. I would love to see what you came up with. If you didn't use this Earth as your object and you used something else, I'd love to check that out too. So this is my process when I want to make any of my objects glow. I'm not holding anything back from you. This is pretty much it. So if you liked the video, please be sure to give it a big thumbs up. And if you're not doing so already, please subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate all the support I can get here. Thank you so much again for watching this video. Please tune in next time for our next episode here at Blended Graphics. In the meantime, everybody, please be safe and take care. I'll see you soon.